She sent the message at some point that afternoon. A 14-year-old girl, sitting at home in a quiet suburb of Dublin, typing into her phone. She pressed send. Within hours, she would be dead. But here is what investigators would later discover: the message was not random. It was not her idea. It was the final step in a sequence that someone else had already set in motion, a sequence that had been planned, written down, and prepared for. Anna Kriegel had no idea. She thought she was going to meet a friend. What was waiting for her inside that building would shock an entire country. The message she sent that afternoon was the last thing she did that belonged to her ordinary life. After that, everything went silent. Before we follow the message, before we walk the route she walked, you need to know who Anna Kriegel actually was. Anastasia Kriegel was born on February 11, 2004, in Moscow, Russia. She was adopted as a young child by Paddy and Geraldine Kriegel, an Irish couple, and brought to Ireland. The family settled in Lucan, a large town on the western edge of County Dublin, bordered by the River Liffey and green fields stretching toward the city. By the spring of 2018, Anna was 14. First year at Confey Community College in Leixlip. She loved drama. She loved dancing. She was warm, vivid, full of energy. Her mother later described a girl who lit up every room she entered. Her father spoke of a daughter full of curiosity, imagination, and love. In photographs, Anna is almost always smiling. She was also 14 in every social sense. Navigating friendships. Messaging friends. Trusting people she knew. What none of her family knew was that one person in her world had been watching her. That person had already made a plan. And the plan involved Anna specifically. Weeks before May 14, 2018, someone had been thinking about Anna Kriegel. A 13-year-old boy, identified throughout all legal proceedings as Boy A, because Irish law protects the identities of juvenile defendants, had been fixating on her. For how long, and to what extent, would not be fully understood until after her death. But what investigators found when they searched his possessions was deeply unsettling. A notebook. Recovered after the murder. Examined by investigators. Presented in court. The prosecution described it as evidence of targeted, premeditated intent, writings and drawings that revealed a fixation on Anna and what Boy A wanted to do to her. The notebook alone would have been disturbing enough. Then the trial revealed something else. Boy A had been consuming violent and disturbing material online, including content relating to sexual violence. Prosecutors argued this material formed part of the picture investigators were building, a portrait of a 13-year-old boy absorbing things no child should ever encounter. The notebook. The online material. The messages he sent in the days before May 14. Each one pointed toward the same conclusion. This had been building for some time. A location had been chosen. And now, someone needed to get Anna there. On the edge of Lucan, near the outer ring road, stood a building that most people had stopped noticing. Glenwood House. Derelict. Abandoned. Dark windows. Overgrown land on all sides. The kind of place that exists on the edge of every suburban town and slowly fades into the background. Someone had not let it fade. Someone had looked at that building and seen something useful. No witnesses. No passers-by. No one close enough to hear anything. The building was not stumbled upon. The prosecution's case was that it had been selected deliberately, ahead of time, as the place where what Boy A had planned would happen. Now the building was ready. Now Boy A needed one more thing. He needed Anna to walk through the door. And he could not bring her there himself. A second boy, identified as Boy B, also 13, a friend of Boy A, had been in contact with Anna in the days before May 14. The communications between them were later recovered by investigators. Reconstructed. Analyzed. Presented in court. What they showed, in the prosecution's account, was coordination. Boy B contacted Anna. Plans to meet were made. And on the afternoon of May 14, 2018, Anna left her home at approximately 5 o'clock, telling her parents she was going to see a friend. Her father had concerns. He asked her not to go. Anna reassured him. She walked out the front door. She had her school bag with her. Investigators later reconstructed her movements from CCTV footage. She walked through the streets of Lucan. She met Boy B at a point near her estate. The two of them walked together through overgrown land toward Glenwood House. The prosecution was precise on this point. Boy B had not simply arranged to meet Anna near a derelict building by coincidence. Boy A had specifically instructed him to bring her there. The destination had been planned. The timing had been coordinated. Anna had no idea. Inside Glenwood House, already waiting, was Boy A. He had arrived before her. He was ready. What Anna did not know, and what investigators would later work to understand, was that Boy B had known where he was taking her. The question was whether he had known why. The forensic evidence recovered from Glenwood House told investigators what had happened inside that building. Anna Kriegel was subjected to a sustained and ferocious attack, physical and sexual. The state pathologist, Dr. Marie Cassidy, gave testimony at trial about the nature and extent of Anna's injuries. They were consistent with prolonged, deliberate violence. They were catastrophic. Anna did not survive. Boy B, the evidence established, left the building at some point. Exactly when, and what he had seen before leaving, would become one of the most fiercely contested questions of the entire trial. Boy A remained. When it was over, he left Anna in an upstairs room, partially concealed beneath a piece of clothing. Near her body, a concrete block that investigators identified as a weapon, a ligature, and her school bag, sitting in the dust of an abandoned room. She had carried it from her front door, walked through her neighborhood with it, stepped into the building with it on her back, believing she was on her way to meet a friend. It was still there when police found her the following evening. For many involved in the case, one detail never left them: the school bag sitting in the dust. Paddy and Geraldine Kriegel waited. They tried to contact Anna. Her phone rang out. She did not come home. They called the Gardaí. A search began immediately, officers and volunteers moving through parks, fields, pathways across the area. Into the evening. Into the night. Nothing. The following evening, May 15, 2018, approximately 24 hours after Anna had walked out her front door, her body was discovered inside Glenwood House. The search for a missing girl ended at a murder scene. Detectives from the Garda National Bureau of Criminal Investigation took over. The building was sealed. Forensic teams moved through every room. And within days, something became clear that made this investigation unlike almost any other in Irish history. Two suspects had been identified. Both of them were 13 years old. The Gardaí were now building a murder case against children. Both boys had to be treated as juveniles throughout. Their questioning took place under specific legal protections. Their parents were present. And yet the evidence being assembled was, in the prosecution's account, direct and powerful. Prosecutors identified 4 things they believed would prove what had happened. First, the DNA. Boy A's DNA was recovered from the scene and from Anna's body. Not circumstantial. Not a matter of inference. The DNA placed him in direct contact with Anna at the location where she died. The defense would not meaningfully displace this at trial. Second, the notebook. The writings and drawings recovered from Boy A's possession. Investigators reviewing the notebook would have understood immediately they were not looking at an impulsive act. Third, the digital communications. The messages between Boy A and Boy B in the days before May 14th. The exchanges between Boy B and Anna that had drawn her out of her house. Together they traced the coordination, the planning, behind the lure. Fourth, what Boy B said. His account of what he had known. What he had been told. What he had understood when he walked Anna through that field toward Glenwood House. 3 of those 4 things were physical facts. Objects. Records. They would speak for themselves in court. The 4th was a story. And a jury would have to decide whether they believed it. The trial of Boy A and Boy B opened on April 1, 2019, before the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. Nothing like it had ever taken place in Ireland. 2 defendants. Both 13 at the time of the offense. Charges including murder and aggravated sexual assault. A jury asked to weigh the guilt or innocence of children accused of crimes against another child. Boy A faced murder and aggravated sexual assault. Boy B faced aggravated sexual assault, the prosecution's case being that he had participated in the attack on Anna before leaving the building. Prosecutors built their case in sequence. Dr. Marie Cassidy's testimony about Anna's injuries. The concrete block. The ligature. The DNA placing Boy A at the scene. The notebook, described in court in increasingly disturbing detail. The digital trail, the messages between Boy A and Boy B that the prosecution said showed planning, not coincidence. Each piece landed in that courtroom like a weight. But the moment that would decide everything was not a piece of physical evidence. It was the moment Boy B stood up and spoke. He was cross-examined at length. His account was consistent. He had not known what Boy A intended to do. He had been asked to bring Anna to the location. He had done so. He had left. He had not known what was going to happen inside. The prosecution pressed on the messages. Asked why Boy A would need to specify the location, the timing, the specific girl, if this was merely 2 friends meeting. Challenged the idea that a boy sent to deliver someone to an abandoned building had no idea why. Boy B maintained his position. He had been 13. He had been directed by another 13-year-old. He had not known the full scope of what he was part of. The jury now held 2 things in their minds. The evidence, the DNA, the notebook, the communications, the forensic reconstruction of what had happened in that upstairs room. And Boy B's testimony, a child's account of being a child who had not understood what he was doing. They deliberated for 3 days. June 21, 2019. Boy A, guilty of murder. Guilty of aggravated sexual assault. Boy B, guilty of aggravated sexual assault. Boy A became the youngest person ever convicted of murder in the history of the Irish state. Anna's parents were in the courtroom. They had been there every day of the 6-week trial. They had heard everything, the pathologist's testimony, the notebook described, the forensic reconstruction of how their daughter had died. The jury's verdict was a legal statement of fact. What had been done to Anna Kriegel had been seen, established, and recorded permanently. Both convictions were appealed. In October 2021, the Court of Appeal dismissed both. The convictions stood. Boy A was sentenced to be detained at the pleasure of the Minister for Justice, indefinite detention under Irish law for a child convicted of murder. Boy B received a custodial sentence. The legal process was over. But in the months and years that followed, one question kept returning. The question the trial had answered least satisfactorily. The trial established what happened. It established the planning, the law, the location, the attack. What it could not establish, and what no court, no expert, no report produced in the aftermath has fully answered, is why Boy A targeted Anna Kriegel specifically. This is not a small question. Anna was not a stranger. She was a girl he knew. A girl in his social world. And at some point, weeks, perhaps longer, before May 14th, something had shifted from fixation into planning. Why her? Investigators and prosecutors could point to the notebook, to the online material, to the digital communications. Together those things painted a picture of obsession and premeditation. But they did not explain the origin. They did not explain what had started it, or why it had attached itself to Anna specifically, or what had converted it from thought to action. The online exposure offered a partial answer. The trial revealed that Boy A had consumed violent and sexualized content, material that investigators and prosecutors argued had shaped what he wanted and how he thought about getting it. Child psychologists and researchers who have examined cases of this kind point to the way certain content can distort a young person's understanding of other people, of power, of harm. But even that explanation is incomplete. Exposure to harmful content alone cannot explain what happened. Many young people encounter disturbing material online and never commit acts of violence. So what made this case different? The honest answer, the one that the trial, the experts, and the subsequent public debate all arrived at, is that nobody knows for certain. The full interior account of how a 13-year-old boy in a Dublin suburb developed the fixation he did, planned what he planned, and carried it out the way he did, remains beyond what any court proceeding or investigation can fully recover. Then there is Boy B. Even after the verdict, Boy B remained a figure that divided those who followed the case closely. The jury found him guilty of aggravated sexual assault, meaning they were satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that he bore criminal responsibility for what he participated in. But the specific question of what he understood, and when, continued to generate debate. Had he known what Boy A intended when he walked Anna to Glenwood House? Had he known enough, even without knowing every detail, that his decision to continue made him culpable? Or was he, as his defense argued, a 13-year-old boy operating under another child's direction, with an incomplete picture of what he was part of? The jury answered that question to the legal standard required. But the psychological and moral weight of it has never fully resolved. What both boys were thinking. What they understood. What it felt like, to whatever extent it felt like anything at all, to do what they did, that territory has no access point. It is sealed. And Anna's family has had to live with that sealing. With the knowledge that the full truth of why their daughter was targeted, planned for, lured, and killed, will never be completely recovered. That is, in its own way, a second loss. Paddy and Geraldine Kriegel have continued to speak about their daughter. Not primarily about the case. About Anna. The dancer. The girl who called her mother her best friend. The child who lit up their home. In 2021, they established the Anna Kriegel Foundation, dedicated to child safety and protecting children from online harm. Built from grief. Directed toward purpose. Toward the possibility that another family might be protected from what the Kriegels could not be protected from. Geraldine Kriegel has spoken publicly about the specific danger of children being exposed to violent and harmful online content. She has spoken not in abstract policy terms but as a mother, asking how a society lets this happen to its children, and what it owes them in return. The foundation carries Anna's name forward. It is not a tribute. It is a challenge. On the afternoon of May 14, 2018, Anna Kriegel sent a message and left her house. She walked through her neighborhood. She met someone she knew. She walked with him toward an abandoned building she had no reason to fear. She went inside. She never came out. All of that is on the record. But what stays, what refuses to become just a case file, is something simpler. It is the school bag. Sitting in the dust of Glenwood House. Carried there by a 14-year-old girl who thought she was on her way to meet a friend. It is the father at the door, uneasy, asking her not to go. It is the front door closing behind her. It is the silence that followed one final message, sent by a girl who had no idea it would be her last. Her name was Anastasia Kriegel. She was called Anna. She was 14 years old. She loved to dance. She called her mother her best friend. Remember her.